Right, we're live, apparently. So I decided I wanted to hold this hangout and look at the Dover trial from 2005, because more and more frequently I'm coming across people who are unfamiliar with what happened at Dover, what the outcome was, why there was that outcome, and some of the stuff that came out in the testimony. And I think it's a good idea to refresh our memories on this, because the accusations are again growing that it's a reactionary judge who has just sided on the side that he wanted, and it had nothing to do with the evidence. So in a way, I think it's time to air this again. So for anybody who isn't familiar with this, the trial concerned Dover Area School Board, and this was in Dover, Pennsylvania. And the school board were deciding on new textbooks, and everything went swimmingly until it came to the new biology textbook, whereupon the board decided that they weren't happy with the book requested by the science department. And they went hunting around for a book that would bring in, initially, some alternative to evolution. And there were many meetings were held, the school board, public meetings, journalists were covering it. And they tipped their hand when somebody stood up in one of these public meetings and said, 2,000 years ago someone died on a cross, won't anyone stand up for him? And that demonstrated more than anything that the problem was purely down to religion. And the board wanted somehow to bring creationism into the biology science classroom. Now, in one television interview, I think it was the chairman of the board or whatever, Bill Buckingham, was interviewed by a local television station, and that video was available on YouTube. And he said that what they wanted to do was to balance the evolutionism with creationism. Now remember that quote. So eventually the teachers protested, and Bill Buckingham wanted to bring in a book called Of Pandas and People. And this book was pro-intelligent design, and it included the statement that intelligent design is described as animals appearing abruptly fully formed, fish with fins and scales, birds with feathers, beaks and wings. So this is the book that they wanted. Now, a compromise was reached in that the books which had mysteriously turned up would be available in the library for students to use, but it would not be either a parallel text within the class or the sole text. And a school administrator would read a statement to a class prior to anything that dealt with evolution, saying that evolution was just a theory, because the teachers refused to read that statement. And then the parents decided to take action because this, they felt, was infringing on their constitutional rights to freedom of or from religion. So this is how the whole case ended up in front of Judge Jones. And it became a trial where science had to produce its evidence, The plaintiffs were Tammy Kitzmiller, who was one of the parents, versus the Dover Area School Board as the defendants. And the defence had to try to prove that intelligent design was science and that it was not creationism. Now, the reason they had to prove that it wasn't creationism was because of, I think it was a 1987 ruling in the Edwards v. Aguilar case, where the judge ruled that teaching creationism could not be done because it was religious, and religion could not be taught in a public school, and certainly not in a public school science class. So we have to remember that ruling and the timing of that ruling for later on when we talk about editions of the book. Now, what I wanted to do here was the judge's decision. If we just go to this first, the judge's decision was that intelligent design should not
he decided that intelligent design was not science. It was creationism by another means, or by another name. Because the bit that you just alluded to there about the additions, that gave it up completely.
Yeah. I'm having difficulty with connections. If I disappear, you'll know why.
Can I add a?
I've just got a
American. Can I add a point that you guys might want to just be aware of? Pennsylvania is said to be Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Then everything else is Alabama. So it's not the most. It's not considered a population of the most enlightened communities. There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of very traditional, I guess, groupings of people that are not the most flexible as far as advancement in society, and distinguishing between their faith and science. So it's not just Dover. It's a lot of areas within Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean I think that's understood.
Well, don't you get the Amish in Pennsylvania as well? So
yeah.
But the people who were doing this were Christian fundamentalists, who were, as far as I could tell, young Earth creationists.
Yeah.
And this is what they wanted. They wanted young Earth creationism taught as a science. But they did it under the guise of intelligent design.
Yeah, they've been kind of, from what I remember the case, they'd actually been planning this and working on this for years to get certain members onto the school board. There was also various, if I remember rightly, various influential business people that were also involved, and you alluded to the fact that books turned up.
Yeah, and we can get to that one. That was a bit of a farce. But I think the reason that we really want to keep this focused on Dover is because we have a ruling there, and we have full transcripts of that case. Now, it became apparent, if we, just for the sake of ease, I'm going to skip over the plaintiffs' various experts. But it was, traditional science. We had Ken Miller, a Roman Catholic, and he explained how science works, etc., and why intelligent design didn't count as a science because it didn't do those things that science must do. But if we go to the defence first, the defence tried to make their case that intelligent design was nothing to do with creationism. And this is where the Edwards v. Aguilar ruling comes in, because of the textbook. Does anybody remember the transitional form between one edition and the next edition?
CDON, something like that, isn't it?
It was C design proponents. Yes. Now, what had happened there was that prior to the Edwards ruling, Of Pandas and People, the textbook, was a book about creationism, specifically creationism. And the word creation and creationism occurred throughout the text. In the edition they wanted to put into the school, however, it talked about intelligent design or intelligent design proponents. But the plaintiff's legal team managed to get hold of paperwork from the editors, I think. And in amongst all of that paperwork, they found a draft. And that draft had been put together when they were revising the edition. And it turned out that what they had done was, using word processing software like Word, they'd done a search for reation, and they had asked the word processing software to replace every occurrence of reation with design proponents. But that left the C behind from creation and the ists from the end of creation. So you had the word C design proponent cysts. And that was the missing link. That was the transitional form. And that is what proved that this was creationism in disguise. Because if you look at the text of the book, where it originally said creation holds that animals appear abruptly, fully formed, with blah, 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 the exact same wording appeared in the next version, but with creation replaced with intelligent design.
You could also you could say that the C design proponent cysts is an evolved state between one form of the book and the other.
Yes. Only Matt could come up with that.
Yeah, oh yeah. So I think the thing about that was that was the smoking gun. Because why were they revising the book? The reason they were revising it was because of the Edwards ruling that creation couldn't be taught. Yes. So therefore, to get this book allowed, they had to remove every reference to creation, creationists or creationism, and yet they left the rest of the text untouched.
Yeah, that was the only difference, was just switching the words. That was it.
Yeah, so that was the smoking gun. Now,
yeah, because I remember seeing in the thing on Nova where the lady, I don't know what her name was, but she got all these subpoenaed editions. You know, where they had the first edition, second edition, and revisions and all that.
Barbara.
Yeah. And she spent so much time going through them, and she found that where the intelligent design or creationism, you know, where there was that overlap of the words, you know, actually in there. And then she also found, you know, saw the references where it was saying creationism, and pamphlets, and then there was something called the Wedge, which was a thing to and there was so much that had happened long before the trial, you know, that was going on behind the scenes.
And there's
you're referring to the Wedge document, which was put together by some law firm or other, if I recall. From the
let me think. The Wedge.
Oh, I don't remember.
I'll just pull it up.
Well, that's a Discovery Institute concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just pull it up.
And that was their strategy, was to create a wedge that they could expand.
Yeah.
Wasn't that Johnson that did that?
I'm just checking. It was a political and social action plan authored by the Discovery Institute. And I'm just trying to find.
Yeah.
Was it Philip Johnson?
Yeah, Philip Johnson, I
Yeah,
think.
Philip Johnson. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. It was. I've got him.
And he was an attorney who thought that he could apply the principles of the law to biology. That was his background to this. Yeah. And
But
it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So the Wedge document, I mean, it did get brought up in the trial as well, to show that there was a religious motivation. Because if they could tie religious motivation to what had been happening with the school board, then it would mean that the Edwards ruling would apply. And it meant that the judge had to apply what they called the Lemon test. And that was another case. It's to do with the purpose. Now, the thing is, I mentioned off-air that I thought the judge's ruling did intelligent design a favour. And I was going to explain that to you. What happened in Dover was that a bunch of young Earth creationists were determined to undermine the teaching of evolution. They knew that if they tried it using creationism, they would end up in trouble because of the Edwards ruling. So what they did was they latched on to intelligent design. And they used intelligent design as a Trojan horse to get creationism into the classroom. And to get that book of Pandas and People into the classroom, which itself was a Trojan horse. Now, I do know, and I'd been hoping that Dennis Jones could join us tonight, because he has worked very hard at trying to separate intelligent design from religion. And the Dover ruling, while it went against intelligent design, it was only going against the type of intelligent design that was being suggested in that particular case. This wasn't a blanket ruling against intelligent design. The problem is that, is it a science? And that's what the judge had to look at. And this is why comments made in meetings or caught on camera when they're saying about creationism, to balance evolution with creationism. This is why these things are so important, because it exposes the motivation. They weren't supporters of intelligent design as such. They were creationists trying to use intelligent design. And if that had been put in place in these schools, then intelligent design would never have been able to remove itself from the religious connotations. Now, since Dover, they have tried very, very hard to do that. Very hard. And I've actually watched some of this unfold in Facebook groups. For example, one young Earth creationist turned up on the intelligent design page and asked, how do you deal with the starlight problem? As in, a galaxy so many million light years away, how do you deal with that problem if there's only been 6,000 years? And they were given a flea in the rear and sent packing, because they were told, we are not talking young Earth creationism. We don't want to go down that route. We want to keep religion out of this. If ID is to progress in any way, shape or form, then we have to stick to the science. And I will agree with that. That if they want to be considered a science, they will have to remain completely detached from the religious point of view. But the other thing is they will also have to do the science. And that seems to have been thin on the ground as well. I mean, by the time of Dover, there was very little that had been done. I think one experiment that Behe gave evidence about that he had done, and I think he was looking for 2 simultaneous changes, and he'd been calculating the odds of it. But when the lawyer, sadly a lawyer had to point this out to him, he was looking at it in bacteria, and the lawyer got him to explain just how many bacteria were in 1 ton of soil, and then work out how many tons of soil there were on the planet. And given that number, for the number of bacteria there were, it meant that even using Behe's own probability calculation, his impossible scenario would happen once every 2 days. And I mean that showed that, in a way, it was the experimental design was lacking in the science that they had done to date. And that is one of the things that had quite a bearing on the judge's ruling. That there was no science there to actually support the contention, but also that what science was being claimed supported it didn't in fact support it. So, as I said, I don't want this to turn into an ID bashing session. I want to look purely at the Dover trial. Has anybody got any thoughts on this without bashing ID, but thoughts on the judgment? And in fact, I'm going to pull up part of the judgment so that I can quote from it later. So, anybody get any thoughts on that so far?
I think that there's a lot to be said about the lack of attention to detail and the lack of foresight that went into the defense. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really don't understand. They were sloppy at best.
Mm-hmm.
You know, see, one big thing is when you have something that's put into a science book that's going to be in schools and all, the information or whatever, it's got to be peer reviewed and all that, and go through all kind of testing and on and on and on. But the creationism stuff is not science. There's no way to test it. There's no verifiable, evidence or falsifiable stuff or anything. And you say, okay, here it is, and we want to throw it in school, without being peer reviewed or anything. And it's not science. If there was something about it that could make it science and have tests, that you can verify and falsify and prove, repeatedly, that would have made a difference. But there's nothing there. Not really. I mean, as far as I know.
I actually think ID should be in the public schools. I think it should be discussed in debate and social studies. I think it's a very interesting and valuable opportunity for kids to understand context and to draw conclusions and to understand how to process information, how to think critically, what the implications are of certain decisions and choices that they make, and what these issues really represent, not just to them and their faith, but to their community and other communities surrounding them, and ultimately, as a nation, our ability to compete by staying very focused on what education is and on what the different disciplines are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like I said, creationism is not science, and they would have to, if they have it in school or a class or something about creationism, they would have to be with the understanding that this is not science.
Yeah, but
it wasn't proven by any kind of scientific method.
Yeah.
It's
but
another view, though. Yeah, it's just another viewpoint.
I think regarding the defence, I think Sheikh was was very well when he said it was sloppy at best because they weren't really defending ID. They were defending the book of Pandas and People, which is predominantly a creationist text.
Yes.
And as that was the case, they knew that they were on a losing foot to begin with, because of the smoking gun seed design proponents. They could see where the book started as a book on special creation and turned into or evolved into a book on intelligent design. But the words creationism was just replaced by intelligent design, and I know it's clear that was the case. I have a copy of Pandas and People with me. I can go and get it and read from it if you want, but
no, just don't.
Yeah, I have one too, and I would like to say it's a really nice-looking, slickly produced book. I will say that it's a very appealing book, and there are parts of it that are really quite subtle. And I honestly think it's worth reading to a lot of people. It's difficult to get now because it's out of print, but it's worth reading for a lot of people to see how subtly they approach this subject. But I don't know if you want to get there yet, but Behe's testimony did intelligent design no good. You know, especially his mousetrap testimony.
Well, I think.
Excuse me, people. Can I just address something here? And I'm going to address it, and then it's going to be done. Okay? A comment has appeared asking me to explain with as much passion why I am a Christian. Jeff Heisenberg. No, I will not explain that here. This hangout is to do with the Dover trial. If you want an answer to that question, then contact me. Thank you very much. Normal service is now resumed.
And I would like to point out one of the really interesting things about the Dover trial is, on the one hand, you had Ken Miller, who was supporting traditional science. Ken Miller's a Roman Catholic. He's also the author of a number of really excellent biology textbooks. I have some of them. On the other hand, you had Michael Behe, the supporter of intelligent design, who was also a Roman Catholic. So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So, although the Catholic Church accepts the theory of evolution, it basically says that's the way God did it.
Yeah.
Not to get bogged in religion or anything, just to, yeah.
So going back to my original point, and I think Fiona agreed with this, they weren't defending intelligent design, they were really defending the textbook of Pandas and People, which is really a textbook on creationism rather than intelligent design.
And I think that the judgment that was handed down is specific to this case and this case alone, because
and also
of what happened. And I wanted to go to the judgment itself, which I did have open a minute ago. There we go. And it's the I'm trying to look at the very, I think it's the very end bit. For a quote.
I know that the judge is pretty scathing regards a couple of the defendants.
Yes, and that's what I'm looking for.
I don't think I've ever seen in this kind of case a judge make those kind of remarks. They were somewhat very lucky, if I remember rightly. But I'll let you find that judgment. I think it's in the supplementary text.
I am actually looking for no, I think it's in the judgment itself.
Yeah. And remember, this is a conservative judge. This is not some flaming liberal.
Where are we? Both the defendants and many of the leading proponents of ID make a bedrock assumption which is utterly false. Their presupposition is that evolutionary theory is antithetical to a belief in the existence of a supreme being and to religion in general. Repeatedly in this trial, plaintiffs' scientific experts testified that the theory of evolution represents good science, is overwhelmingly accepted by the scientific community, and that it in no way conflicts with, nor does it deny, the existence of a divine creator. To be sure, Darwin's theory of evolution is imperfect. However, the fact that a scientific theory cannot yet render an explanation on every point should not be used as a pretext to thrust an untestable alternative hypothesis grounded in religion into the science classroom or to misrepresent well-established scientific propositions. The citizens of Dover area were poorly served by the members of the board who voted for the ID policy. It is ironic that several of these individuals who so staunchly and proudly touted their religious convictions in public would time and again lie to cover their tracks and disguise the real purpose behind the ID policy.
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
That was so dead on.
Yeah, and then the next bit, and this is the official judgment of the court. This is what does take your breath away a bit. Those who disagree with our holding will likely mark it as the product of an activist judge. If so, they will have erred, as this is manifestly not an activist court. Rather, this case came to us as the result of the activism of an ill-informed faction on a school board, aided by a national public interest law firm eager to find a constitutional test case on ID, who, in combination, drove the board to adopt an imprudent and ultimately unconstitutional policy. The breathtaking inanity of the board's decision is evident when considered against the factual backdrop which has now been fully revealed through this trial. The students, parents and teachers of the Dover Area School District deserved better than to be dragged into this legal maelstrom with its resulting utter waste of monetary and personal resources. Now that is scathing. And the judge himself was appointed by Bush. He was a Conservative judge. And they were actually quite pleased initially that they had got this judge.
Oh, yeah.
But the judge based those comments on what went on in the court. And the fact that those board members who were trying to get ID into the science classroom because of religious beliefs were actually lying under oath. In fact, at one point, the judge stopped the plaintiff's lawyer and took over the questioning himself because the witness was lying on the stand under oath.
He actually went and turned around and said something along the lines of, if you keep on in this course, I will have no choice but to jail you for perjury. And he took over the questioning. Yeah. It's just breathtaking that could happen. I mean, it really was a proper lying for Jesus situation.
And as you begin to dig into this, you can actually see why the judgment itself does ID a favour, because it does draw a distinction between those board members and intelligent design as a whole. It points out that those individuals were motivated by religious reasons. But the judge also pointed out in his judgment, and I don't think I could find it if I tried, that one of the board members who gave evidence, who had supported this book being put into the school, didn't even know it was called intelligent design, and on the stand kept referring to it as intelligence design. And when asked about it, she admitted she didn't know what intelligent design was actually about. She just trusted Bill Buckingham, the head of the board. And yet she was voting on this book. She was voting on the education of children. And so this is why that judgment. For anyone who is serious about intelligent design, they shouldn't be blasting that judgment. They should be applauding that judgment in attempting to divorce intelligent design from this shower of dishonest activists who were prepared to lie under oath.
But then again, as we've already agreed, this trial wasn't really about intelligent design per se.
Mm-hmm.
It was about the textbook of Pandas and People, which is predominantly a creationist textbook, not an intelligent design
Yes.
Textbook.
Yes.
And I think that's the key issue.
Yeah.
What was the part of the trial where they brought out all the books and they just piled them up?
That was to do, Michael Behe had been talking about the evolution of the immune system, and he said that there was no research on the evolution of the immune system. Whereupon the plaintiff's lawyers started to produce paper after paper, textbook after textbook, discussing the evolution of the immune system until the pile was so high on the little shelf in the witness box that Michael Behe couldn't see over the top of it, and he had to keep around the side. And this was all the research that he said didn't exist.
Didn't he also say at the end that that still wasn't enough, though?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he did. He still said he wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, and the attorney
Which
asked him,
goes
have
to
you
show
read
you
this
the
book? Have you read this paper?
Yeah.
Have you read this paper, this book? Oh, well, no, and then he, just missed it, even though he hadn't even read it or studied it.
And when asked what would be sufficient, what would be sufficient for him to believe, he just said nothing would, basically.
And
So he did
that's the whole attitude with a lot of young Earth creationists run into on YouTube. That's
But you see,
exact
now
attitude.
here's the problem. Here's a really big problem. Because Michael Behe now accepts common dissent.
Yes.
To what extent, I'm not sure. But he now accepts common dissent. He was responsible for a chapter of Pandas and People. He was there in that court defending intelligent design being taught to children in the form of creatures appearing abruptly fully formed. But now Michael Behe no longer holds to that. Now that was only 9 years ago. But you would have had how many years worth of children going through that school and being taught that. And now Michael Behe's changed his mind. And this is why unestablished science is not taught to children, because science changes so rapidly.
Well, you have to add a caveat to that, Fiona. Fringe science, I mean, like Big Bang cosmology and pre-Big Bang cosmology, that sort of area does change, like the wind. But some stuff will always remain very, very steadfast. Things like Newton's laws of motion, for example, evolution, chemistry. I'm only thinking of physics things here. Special relativity, general relativity. Those will always remain steadfast, and those will always be taught. But some of the far-reaching ideas, models, aren't taught because the amount of data corroborating them is little or none. So that's why I think you just have to add a caveat there, just to say those things.
Yeah, and for those of you watching, I've actually remembered this time to open the Q&A before we went on air, so you can actually type your questions into the Q&A box. Gosh. Now, the thing is, if these children had been given this book with all this thing about creatures appearing abruptly, and then even one of the authors of one of the chapters of the book has now changed his mind about that, And a lot of people, once they've left school, they don't go anywhere near science again. And they would have left school with this idea that intelligent design was an accepted theory, when it wasn't. It's one of those subjects that you would put on the sort of we're working on it type thing. It's one of the reasons why they don't teach abiogenesis in schools, because we don't have a theory of abiogenesis. We have some hypotheses that are being tested, but nothing has come out that is rock solid, and that's why it doesn't get taught. You've got limited time with children when you're teaching them science, and you've got to get the basics of science in place, the very basics. And you don't have time to go into every hypothesis that's out there. You stick to the well-established science. But
one good thing about oh, I'm sorry.
Going back to the trial, it really was between science and religion. And as I say, intelligent design proponents are trying to distance themselves from that. They are trying to concentrate on the science. So, I mean, I will give them that. They are trying to get away from the religious fundamentalists that attempted to hijack intelligent design for their own ends. And I think that's the thing that's missed about Dover. And what Matthew is saying, that it was that particular book that was in trial because it had started out as a creationist text, and I think that's the crucial point, because this was a judgment that basically said that the form of ID being proposed in this particular case was nothing but creationism in disguise.
Yeah, I think you have an important point here, Fiona. Because in a lot of discussions, you will see some people say, well, intelligent design has been ruled illegal. You can't teach intelligent design in the schools.
Yeah.
That's actually not true. There is a variation of intelligent design, which is just simply creationism disguised. That you can't teach. I don't know if you remember this. I'm sure it's somewhere in your research, but they changed in the book Pandas and People, in the proofs for the book, they changed creationism to intelligent design.
Yeah.
However, if you look at some of the later writings, there was another word they were going to use. They were already ready with another term if intelligent design didn't work.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what it was.
Because it was the same thing that they were going to be teaching, just changing what they called it. And that's what they had done, going from creation to intelligent design. They changed the name, but they were teaching the same thing. And the other problem is that if you want to introduce a textbook into a school that says that all the animals appear abruptly fully formed, then you are actually also having to deny the existence of the fossil record, where you find transitional forms. And I mean, I don't want to go into that in great detail, but it's just the fact that that one very short statement in the beginning of the book effectively throws out a lot of well-established science in one short paragraph. Now, the problem I think that a lot of people had with what was going on was that it was one particular form that the Dover board were trying to get taught, and it was Christian young earth creationism. Not old earth creationism, not another creation story. They were being very specific about this one. And that, to then try and hide that, which it to me is lying. And as the judge said, they were doing this under oath.
Yeah.
The other
Well, they lied about.
Sorry, on you go.
Oh, I was just going to say they even lied about where the books came from.
They did.
They lied about who paid for the books.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the guy that was head of this. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It was Bill Buckingham stood up in his church, and he requested donations to buy, I think it was 60 copies of the book, and his congregation donated the money. That money went into his account. He then wrote a personal cheque to the father of Alan Bonsall. Alan Bonsall was on the board. So we'll talk about Bonsall Jr. and Bonsall Sr. Now, Bonsall Jr. was on the board. Bill Buckingham wrote a cheque to Bonsall Sr. He gave the cheque to Bonsall Jr. Jr. passed the cheque on to Bonsall Sr. Bonsall Sr. then cashed the cheque and used the money to buy the copies of the books. And the books then turned up anonymously in the school. And during the deposition stage, Bill Buckingham, under oath, was asked where did the money come from for the books, and he said, I don't know. He was asked who gave money for the books. He said, I don't know. When he was on the stand, Alan Bonsall was asked about that, and he said he didn't know. He did know. He was handed the cheque by Bill Buckingham, and it was drawn on Bill Buckingham's personal account. So that is lying under oath. Now, Bill Buckingham tried to get out of that by saying, oh yes, but I don't know which member of the congregation gave how much. But that isn't what he was asked. He was asked where the money for the books came from. And it came from a collection that he organised in his church. He knew where the money came from. So that was one of the instances of lying under oath. And why couldn't he just go out and buy the books? Why did he need to hide where the money had come from?
Was he
writing a cheque, but to the father of a board member?
Was he picked up on that?
Oh yes, this all came out when when Bonsall was in the witness stand, and I think it happened when Buckingham was in the stand as well. The judge stopped the plaintiff's attorney from asking questions and took over the questioning himself because he was furious. He was absolutely furious, and he reminded them that they were under oath, that they were to tell the truth, and that is why the judge made the statement that he did, which was, where is it? And this is the bit that really got me. I read it out earlier, but I want to read it again. It is ironic that several of these individuals who so staunchly and proudly touted their religious convictions in public would time and again lie to cover their tracks and disguise the real purpose behind the IDE policy. Now, I mean, that is saying they were lying.
And there was another instance where, I forget which guy it was, but he was actually on camera talking to a newsman, and they videotaped him. He was talking about trying to get creationism taught in schools or something. And he mentioned creationism, and later he said, oh, well, I had all this on my mind, and I'm going, oh, don't say creationism, say intelligent design, but, oh, I slipped and said creationism. You know, they got him on that too.
Because, under oath, Bill Buckingham said that he had never used the word creationism in regard to this, and yet a local news crew had him on tape saying that they just wanted to balance evolutionism with creationism. So that was another lie.
What made me sort of amused after seeing the Nova documentary was when Behe was on the stand and he tried to extend the axioms of science to include supernaturalism and
astrology. Yeah.
And he admitted that astrology was a science. Under
He was changing the definition of science. He changed the definition of science. And it was, again, a lawyer who pointed out to him that under the definition that he proposed, which would allow ID to be considered a science, you could also consider astrology to be a science.
Absolutely.
And he agreed.
And which it was in Newton's time. And that's how I think Newton got into mathematics, because he wanted to understand astrology better. And in order to do that, he needed to understand geometry and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was considered a science
Yes,
when
but
we
given
didn't
the
know
ad-
much about.
given the advent of modern science.
Yeah.
You know, furthermore with Behe, I think we pretty much know, I'm not sure if it's been talked about already, that was sort of the clip where all the books and all the peer-reviewed articles about how the immune system had evolved over time were basically stacked up against him.
Yeah.
Like, he literally just kept bringing all these textbooks and he would keep stacking them on the stand just to make a point against Behe. And it was, some said it was kind of a childish move, but I think it was a very powerful move because it basically showed, you know, what was the big burden that Behe was up against.
Yeah, I agree. It was.
Yeah, I think it's. I think the.
It was a show move, a display of pure showmanship.
It was a Perry Mason moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even in the documentary, he said it's a lawyer's trick. So I think that he fell for that, and he fell quite heavily, I think.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the funding here because I've found a little bit in the judgment itself, which I'll read out, because I think it's important and because there's a little nugget in there that I had missed. Now here we go. This is straight from the judgment. I am reading it out. The testimony at trial stunningly revealed that Buckingham and Bonsall tried to hide the source of the donations because it showed, at the very least, the extraordinary measures taken to ensure that students received a creationist alternative to Darwin's theory of evolution. To illustrate, we note that at January the 3rd, 2005, depositions taken pursuant to an order of this court so plaintiffs could decide whether to seek a temporary restraining order. Upon repeated questioning by plaintiffs' counsel on this point, neither Buckingham nor Bonsall provided any information about Buckingham's involvement in the donation or about a collection he took at his church. Buckingham actually made a plea for donations to purchase pandas at his church, the Harmony Grove Community Church, on a Sunday before services, and a total of $850 was collected as a result. As proof of such donation amount, plaintiffs introduced into evidence a cheque in the amount of $850 endorsed to Donald Bonsall, Alan Bonsall's father, drawn on Buckingham's account jointly held with his wife, with the notation of pandas and people appearing on the cheque. Alan Bonsall gave the money to his father, who purchased the books. Now here's the nugget. When Sparr, now that's Bertha Sparr, head of the science department, when Bertha Sparr received the shipment of books and began to unpack them, she discovered a catalogue from the company that sold the books listing pandas under creation science.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So and this is again, this is taking me to what happened in Dover as being distinct from what intelligent design is, because there was so much more going on in Dover that it is unfair and it is wrong to say that Dover slapped down intelligent design. Now, I'm not trying to cheerlead intelligent design here, but what I'm trying to do is say that those people who today support intelligent design should actually be glad that this circus was slapped down by the judge. Because what was being proposed there was not intelligent design at all. And I mean, you can actually go through the entire judgment and you just find nugget after nugget after nugget, when it becomes apparent that the whole thing was smoke and mirrors by some religious fundamentalists to get creation into a science class, come hell or high water.
But I don't know of anybody else that's really behind the intelligent design movement that's not a part of a Christian, I don't know, organization.
Haram Yahya.
There's one. He's a philosopher.
Haram Yahya.
No, he's an agnostic.
David Berlinski.
That's the one.
That guy,
Don't say
he pisses me off. He pisses me off. I know, you're right. He's a mathematician, by the way, I think.
No, he isn't.
No, he's a philosopher. You're right.
Yes.
Yes.
He's not to be called a mathematician because that would be insult to mathematicians.
Yes.
Yeah,
his odds. I actually tried to go through the math of his odds once because I was looking for some math to look at because they keep coming up with these wild odds.
Yeah, another term
the problem
for
is
reducible complexity.
Yeah, but the problem is though it's all based on false premises, so it's nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah. My question also is how can?
Yeah, but I think the problem with
wait a second. How can intelligent design become a science?
Well, if Behe actually on the stand when he was asked, described an experiment that could be done. And when asked if he'd done it, he said no. And when asked why not, he said it wasn't up to him to do it. It was to those who opposed intelligent design to do it.
Yeah. True science is there.
That can be.
Yeah. Now,
the burden of proof. That's nice.
Yeah, but the experiment, and I can't remember the details of it, but the experiment that he proposed is possible to do. I don't think it would be the only one you would have to do. You would have to take your results from that and move on to the next one. But the point is that nobody's doing them. They're all sitting there coming up with the ideas, but they won't go and do the work. So they've got their troops on the ground who are, they'll look at ID in a favourable light, but they're not being given any ammunition by those in charge. And it means that what's happening is that people like Behe, Meyer, etc., are sitting in their bunker with their tin hats and the flak jackets on, but they're sending out their ground troops armed with bows and arrows against a nuclear weapon.
Right, but I have a hard time with that, and I'll tell you why. I think that there's enough scientists in the world that if there was an experiment that was viable, that could enhance a theory or build a new theory, they'd be all over it. And that's not happening.
Exactly.
Well, the reason that's not happening is because when intelligent design first was brought up, and we were getting all these various strange things said about it, the scientists said, let's ignore them and they'll go away. Don't give them any credence by engaging them. And it was only when it came to Dover that science woke up and realised just how much ground they now had to catch up. And I don't know, I don't think the science will make that mistake again. Because it meant that intelligent design had quietly and without any opposition become established.
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. I'm sorry. I know that you've researched this all and you know your stuff, but for some reason it just doesn't. It doesn't fit for me.
Oh no! But the thing is, because of what's happened, we now have nobody wants to touch intelligent design with a barge pole because of what happened. Because of what happened at Dover.
There's too many people out there that are opportunists that, in my opinion, that would be able to raise money from some organization and be able to run these experiments.
Well, the people that should be the people that should be doing that though are the scientists. The few
I understand
scientists
that, but there's there's got to be somebody. I would be amazed that there would be nobody in the world of science that would be willing to take this leap, considering what the implications are, though.
Yeah, but what you have to remember is this, that they are the ones that are proposing this. They need to go out and do the work and support their claims.
I get that. But it's a chance for somebody to get notoriety, and in the way society works, that's money. And there's enough people.
But the problem is this, Sheikh, and I will say this, no problem, that when you're a scientist and you're carrying out research, you write a research proposal and you submit it to a funding body.
Sure.
And it's got to be a really good proposal, or you do not get funding for it. Okay?
Now, I get that 100%.
What you can then do, what you could do, is say, okay, what I'll do is I'll go and ask the Discovery Institute for money, and I'll investigate intelligent design. The problem is this, that because of what happened at Dover, if you have taken money from the Discovery Institute, your career is ended.
Right. That I get, but there's other organizations that have the wealth to be able to fund and the interest in intelligent design being recognized with more credibility. You know, there's conservative groups, there's religious groups, there's money there.
But they have to find
that's true, but no one's going to touch it.
That's the
thing. No one's going to touch it.
Yeah, the point is this: money does not do the work at the lab bench. You need a person, you need a scientist to do the work. We can have as many millions of dollars sitting on a lab bench, and at the end of 3 years, you'll still have all those millions of dollars sitting on a lab bench, and the work isn't done.
But isn't the other part to this, Fiona, that when you look at that, it sounds like some of this stuff, it would seem to me, sort of has been done, and it hasn't been done directly as a way to overthrow, if you will, intelligent design. But when you look at things like Talk Origins, and you look at some of the references and some of the articles, the problem here seems to be that even when there has been research and investigation done about a particular claim, and you put that forward, it's still just poo-pooed and ignored, and they roll right over it, and they could care less. So if that is going to be the result, and that's how they're going to treat any research that contradicts their claim, then what's the point of investing money to do it all over again, more comprehensively, because they're going to treat it exactly the same way.
I don't buy that at all.
You don't?
To me, that's a very big problem within the science community, and not the intelligent design community. And money talks. People do things for money. I find it hard to believe that a private Fiona, let me finish, please. I find it hard to believe that a private organization that's well funded can't come up with a price that would get a top scientist or group of scientists to take this on. It's just, to me, that's baffling.
Well,
one of the reasons is this: one of the last times that approach was tried, we ended up with an awful lot of babies without arms and legs, but with hands and feet, because of thalidomide.
Thalidomide, yeah.
Because the first group of scientists found a problem. They were binned and another group were brought in. They found the same problem. They were binned and another group were brought in. And they didn't want to lose their job.
But isn't that apples and oranges? We're not talking about...
No.
We're talking about an educational application.
Jake, what I'm saying is that in buying a scientist to do the work and dictating what they have to find,
right,
there is no integrity.
No, it's not what. No, that's not what I was suggesting.
No, but that is what will happen. You're saying, there's enough money there.
There's a problem with science, then. Then there really is a big problem with science.
No, because nobody's taking the money. That's the point, Shay.
No,
they won't take it.
The problem is that we can't create an experiment that ensures objectivity.
I think the money...
Well, that whole issue is a non-issue because we don't have anything to do with it, and whatever reason they're not touching it. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah,
it's not happening. That's
you also have to ask yourself.
Yeah, I get
why
that.
they will not do it.
Well,
Sorry.
I think part of that is
You have to ask the question, why those who are so in favour of intelligent design, who have the qualifications, who have the facilities, aren't doing the experiments that they themselves have proposed. Why haven't they done them?
Right, and that is a good.
I mean, miles of predictive power of utility. That what matters in science. I mean,
Yeah,
the thing with evolutionary theory, if you can apply a selection criteria to organisms like animals and plants and the like, and you will see a capacity for adaptive change. I mean that is demonstrable and measurable in laboratory settings. So the problem with intelligent design is you're saying that that an invisible mind is producing the complexity of planet Earth with regard to life. So and if that is the case for the intelligent design people, if they're saying that there are experiments that they could do to prove this, it's up to them to prove it. Otherwise, why should the scientific community ignore the null hypothesis?
Well, yes, I think that is the problem. I think that if you to take it out of the realm of intelligent design just for a second, if there were 3 different groups, one in the UK, one in the US, and one in Asia, or whatever, some group that came out and said, "Aha, alchemy really works." Okay, well, but we haven't really done any research to definitively demonstrate that it works, but we claim it works. Well, I would not expect, nor would I want anybody to use any money to run around and do their work for them and disprove a claim that has nothing to substantiate it in the first place. Now, if the alchemy group wants to engage at that level, then if the alchemy group does some research and can produce some data, right, that supports the idea, then it's legitimate for the scientific community to look at that data and see whether or not it stands up under scrutiny. But it's not their job to go dig the hole for these guys.
But this is my question also and this is for Fiona. There's something that you had said earlier, and I might have misheard it. And that was that Michael Behe was able to describe an experiment that would either lend credibility or verify intelligent design.
It wouldn't verify it.
Okay. Now my question is, that's fine. Now my question though is, the idea of intelligent design really does not have a formal foundation in anything, because when it comes down to it, it still assigns. You understand what I'm saying? It still assigns something that's unknown to something that is observed.
Yes, and that is one of the biggest problems with it.
Well, I think, and I'm going to. And Fiona, I would be interested to hear your comment on this statement here, because I'm going to hypothesize something here real briefly. I think that the intelligent design community, they don't want to do the research, not necessarily because they don't think that they will find support for their own proposition. I think they want the scientific community to do, Eric, exactly what you're asking them. Let me finish. What you're asking them to do. I think by not doing the research, they are trying to bait the scientific community into doing this work, because as soon as the scientific community takes that onus on themselves, now the intelligent design people can come back and say, you are attacking us. You came after us. Your intent was to disprove us. This is not how science is. They will turn the exact. They'll turn how science is supposed to work on the scientists because they've taken that bait, and I think that's why they need to not take it.
It's a possibility, but I think that would be very. I think it would behoove them if they're able to prove their position and then have it verified or unverified. I think the amount of money that would be invested in the different projects would be enormous. I mean, if we're talking about so I don't think if that's what they're thinking, then I think they're very sadly mistaken.
Well, I think
you might be right.
But the reason I think they're thinking that, though, Eric, is because I think they realize that that the evidence is not there. They're not idiots. They know the evidence is not there. So what are the options? Well, the best option now then is to bait the scientific community, into going where they're not supposed to go, and then using that against them. I mean, that's the only way
that
they
makes
can
more sense to me.
progress.
That makes sense.
And I'd like to give you an example. I think it's from 2011. There was a paper produced by Doug Axe and Anne Godger of the Discovery Institute. And what they did was they looked at two enzymes that were said to have a common ancestor. And what they did was they tried to turn one of the enzymes into the other enzyme. Now, this became known as the cousins problem. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get this to happen in a one-step process. But the problem is, if you have got two enzymes that have diverged from a common enzyme, the only way to turn one into the other is by a two-step process. Back down the branch to the common ancestor, and then up the other branch. Right?
Right.
But they were trying to do it in one step.
Yeah, they just want to jump across.
Right, they can't do it. And what they were trying to do was put sort of the
alchemy.
They were trying to, no. They're trying to get it in reverse. They're trying to get to reverse it. But there are some things that you cannot reverse because of the arrow of time.
Right.
The fact that I cannot unbreak a cup doesn't mean that I can't break it. The fact that I can uncut hair doesn't mean that I cannot cut it. Okay? Now, the other problem is this, and this is where the cousins come in. If you consider two cousins, they share a grandparent. The experiment, the way it was set up, was attempting to turn one cousin into the other cousin.
Right.
Now, would you look at an experiment where someone has taken some people and they've been unable to change one cousin into the other cousin, and then they say, so therefore they cannot share a grandparent? You laugh at them.
Yeah, no, of course.
That was the problem with that experiment. They set out to answer a question, but the design of the experiment that they set up didn't actually ask the question they thought it was asking. They got the answer and they applied that answer to the question they thought they had asked. But that wasn't the question that they had asked. It was very, very badly designed. It was appalling experimental design.
You guys, I have to take my dog out for a walk. Can we stop the hangout until I get back?
No way! No time.
I don't believe he even asked that one, Eric. Sorry.
So, sorry,
Just tell the dog to cross his legs and wait.
Right, I've now completely lost my thread. Thanks a lot, guys.
It's something to do with peeing dogs, Fiona.
No, I got
it.
This was your badly
you were talking
designed.
about how badly designed a experiment was.
Yeah, but there was something else that was coming next.
Pokemon evolution is not real.
There was something.
Oh yes, I remember now.
Oh,
I remember now. The problem is this: the proteins that they used also didn't share a recent common ancestor.
How far back was it?
I don't know, but Anne Godger admitted. I don't know how you pronounce her name, Godger, but she admitted that that was a really bad design flaw, and they should have used proteins that were much more closely related if they wanted to try that experiment. Because for this one-step process where you have your common ancestor that diverges, to come back, you've got to go down one branch and up another. That's 2 steps. But they were going much, much further back.
Fiona, isn't there, I read something I thought in the past, and if I don't explain this well, my apologies, but I thought I read something way back that in terms of looking at DNA and common ancestors, that I'm not going to get this right, but that we can track the evidences of viruses that have attacked, have left their imprint in DNA through common ancestry. Am I saying that the right way?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you are.
these.
Yeah. It's endogenous retroviruses.
There was a lot of work done on that
Yeah.
about the HIV virus as well.
Yeah, but no, the endogenous retroviruses, retroviruses insert themselves into the genome.
Okay.
And endogenous retroviruses are retroviruses that are actually found in the genome itself, and they stay there, so they're inherited.
So the virus is actually I want to understand this, and I lack the background here. But so is the virus a separate entity that lives within the DNA strand?
No,
I mean,
no,
does it actually get copied? No. Okay, it's not. Okay, so it's
the remnant of a virus that's now stuck in our DNA. These viruses, what they do is when they enter a cell, they're RNA viruses, and they use an enzyme called reverse transcriptase, which converts RNA to DNA.
Okay.
Well, that's backwards. And then that DNA snips a chromosome, inserts itself in, and rejoins the chromosome back together again.
Okay.
Now, it can then be copied from there. But also, if that was a sex cell, that would be passed on to the next generation. Now, what these viruses can also do is that they can cut themselves back out. They excise themselves from the genome, okay? And they can go through a full replication cycle and then release their progeny. But endogenous retroviruses are defective. They can't cut themselves back out. They're stuck.
So we can track them through common ancestry.
Yes.
How, and I this is a rhetorical question, I suppose, but how do the intelligent design people explain that?
Free did a video about that. He basically tried to argue that they were locus specific, i.e., they weren't random. It was they were just hotspots. What he failed to mention, and what they always fail to mention, is the fact that we share most with chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos. In other words, what evolution would predict. So even if they were right, it's still evidence for common ancestry. So that's basically how they explain it, I think.
Yeah, well, actually, another intelligent design proponent on the evidence of the GAL-O pseudogene data has said that perhaps at the moment limited common ancestry among primates is the best explanation. And it seems to be at the moment what we're getting is a retreat step by step. But this is the thing, I didn't really want to get into the merits of intelligent design against evolution. That's a whole series of hangouts. No, this was just to do with the trial itself. Because if you remember, it's about the book. It's not about intelligent design. It's about dressing up creationism in a dress and lipstick and calling it intelligent design. And I'm sorry, but you put a pig in a dress and lipstick, you still don't want to kiss it, do you?
Well, if it's Miss Piggy, maybe.
Well, I don't know. If it was on the way to becoming bacon, I might do it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I got your point, Fiona.
Yeah. The thing is, you should look up Concordance. He has got some cracking videos. So you
I posted a link to a thing on the HIV virus, the history of it. He had accepted a challenge by Once Forgiven, Now Free, about proving evolution, and he used his actual work on the HIV virus to kind of confront Once Forgiven, Now Free, and that's a link to the first one.
Interesting.
It's amazing. Those two videos are amazing. They really are.
Yeah.
Well, one of the problems.
Somebody got the link to the Nova documentary.
Oh, it's great. Ed is in that. Ed Brayton is in that.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to get him tonight and I couldn't get him. He's very good. And it might be worth doing a hangout again at some point if we can get Ed. And I'd hope to have Dennis Jones here as well, but he hasn't turned up. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at these comments.
I would love to speak with Ken Miller. I wonder if he would do it. I sent him an email once and he responded with a really nice a thank you. I just said I just really.
Oh, for goodness. Sorry, Sheik. Sorry.
What?
I said I was only going to deal with this once, when I've been asked to be so passionate about my faith by Jeff Eisenberg. He has now put a comment under the YouTube video saying fake. I am a fake Christian because I refuse to use this hangout to defend my faith. Now listen, Jeff, this is to you. This hangout is about the trial in Dover, Pennsylvania in 2005. It is not about Fiona's faith. If you want to know about my faith, then either watch a hangout where I talk about my faith or contact me and talk about my faith. But to be quite honest, Jeff, there are people in this hangout who want to talk about Dover, Pennsylvania and the trial, and we are not going to be derailed for you and you alone. You do not dictate the subject of my hangouts. Get off your high horse and go away. Goodbye, dear.
Can I get it back to the trial for a minute?
I'm really sorry, people. I'm sorry about this. I know it's off topic.
It's okay.
He has been on my case for 48 hours now.
Yeah, it's your hangout. But in the trial, did you remember in the beginning of the trial, right before the trial, there were a lot of people, including I think Casey Luskin and those folks, who were going to support the intelligent design side.
Yes.
Then they bailed.
They did.
And I forget exactly. Go for it, because that's the part I forget exactly why they bailed, and I'd really be interested in.
Yeah, that was very interesting, and I think the reason that they bailed, and I could be misremembering this, was because when they looked into it, they realised that to get the book into the schools, to take the side of the defence, they would have to support young earth creationism. They would have to be supporting a board who said religion has nothing to do with it, yet that had comments such as 2,000 years ago someone died on a cross, won't anyone stick up for him? They were going to, I think they realised it couldn't be defended because it was a pig in lipstick.
Yeah.
And that's why, and they knew it was going to head for defeat because of the Edwards ruling and because it would fail the Lemon test.
Oh, I meant to bring up the Lemon test. I'm glad you brought that up, actually.
Because that's what the judge applied in deciding the case. He applied the Lemon test, and I'm just hunting for the Lemon test.
Is that
the Lemon test? I actually got it.
Are the transcripts from the Dover trial directly available, not necessarily as part of a book? They're public record, I would assume.
Oh yeah,
yes, they are.
It's Lemon v. Kurtzman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put a link to the full video of the Nova thing over in the side.
That's the Nova, but I would be interested in actually reading the documents, the original transcripts, if those are.
That's in there, Carlton. Carlton, that's the original full transcripts of the whole trial.
Oh, it is.
Including the judgment.
Wow, I'll read those this week.
No, you might read them this month.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because it went on for a long, long time. I read them daily as they came out. It was a long trial. I would come home from work, and before I even ate, I was on the computer. I'd feed my child, right?
I didn't
but then
realize
I was on the computer to read the transcripts because it went on and on and on. It was fascinating to read.
Now, I just caught a name in looking at that, Kevin Padian, and I didn't realize that he was part of that. I've always admired just the one YouTube that I've seen of him that he's done in terms of what the scientific review process is like. So yeah, that'll be some interesting reading, to be sure.
Oh, and it's on the ACLU website also. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
I get nervous when intelligent design is quiet because in my mind that means we're respinning this and we're kind of letting it die down so we can come out with a new model and hopefully no one remembers what we said before. So I'm waiting for the next barrage or whatever it's going to be called.
But Carlton, you know what? There's another way to look at it, and that is, maybe there is something to it, and it just hasn't been processed in a way that separates it from what we don't want it to be. Maybe there are some concepts in there that can, at some point, be applied effectively as science.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the outcome, then that's one thing, or as a lesson to not fall through the cracks and allow something to become science that isn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a bad argument.
Well, I think irreducible complexity has something to it, in that it is just things become irreducibly complex because of natural selection.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem, that if you remove something, if you remove scaffolding from a building, it will fall down. But then when you've built it up to the top, when you build it to the top, it's like the analogy I give is becoming shipwrecked and then building a bridge made out of salt and then getting over to an island. Once the bridge sort of erodes away, you've got no evidence of how you get to the island from your ship.
Yeah.
So
I think that that's part of the problem, and I think what Eric said too is true. I think that maybe this is another disservice I'm sorry, I know we're not supposed to be straying from the court case, but I was just going to say that. But maybe that's another disservice that they do, in that they in trying to tie all this research or information or questions to the concept of intelligent design, they're poisoning the well. They're making it so that they're making it so that the pieces that actually might have some legitimate scientific information associated with them, no one wants to touch them anymore because they're contaminated.
So they have to be dressed. They have to be dressed up differently.
Well, you see, this is a problem, though, and I think that anyway, Dover is partly responsible for this, because what impression did you get from watching Dover trial or watching the Nova documentary?
Well, I never thought about it from the way you said it, Fiona. I never thought about it once that way.
Yeah. Well, you see, at the time I didn't either, but it came to me once, one of those light bulb moments, and I was in conversation with Dennis Jones, and it just came to me, and I said, Dennis, if you're so set on making sure that intelligent design is kept away from religion, then instead of bashing the Dover decision, you should be cheering it on. Because Dover was religion and nothing but religion.
Good for you, Fiona.
Well, Fiona, how do you? I hope this is related, but I know obviously Michael Behe was a proponent in the Dover trial, or was part of the Dover trial. Not all people with a scientific background who support intelligent design are employed by Christian universities and Christian schools, they're not all direct employees of the intelligent design group. Some of them, like Michael, are at secular universities. And you mentioned earlier that one of the reasons that science doesn't want to get involved in this or touch this is it's like touching the third rail. If you do, you're immediately tied to intelligent design, and your career then is
limited.
You're pissing on your career, right? But yet we have people like Michael Behe, who still have a job at secular. They're still teaching. They're still professors, and they are very much in contact with this live wire, and it doesn't seem to adversely affect them. Why is that?
Well, I don't know if you could say it hasn't adversely affected him, because his institution has actually put out a statement saying that they are not associated with his views.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had to.
okay.
Yeah, that's not something you would really want your institution to be doing.
Is that an uncommon
And
thing for a stand for a
Very.
university to take?
That's the
Yes.
only time I have ever heard it. That's the only.
Yeah, even like Mark Regnerus and that utter nonsense he did last year. You know what he was investigated for. Of course, this is in social science. You know, even the university didn't distance themselves from him.
Mhm.
And
You
which
know,
was what was
so
his thing?
that's
I'm sorry.
it's really. Oh,
Yeah.
he was the guy that came up with that supposed study that shows gay parents are worse than straight parents.
Oh, okay, okay.
But
Yeah,
the
yeah.
reality was he was comparing broken families with intact families. That was what was
Yeah.
really happening.
Yeah.
I mean, he got investigated. The paper was retracted. A whole bunch of other stuff happened, but
Mhm.
he still has his job, and the university didn't say anything negative, and that was a big scandal.
Yeah.
So this is
and-
very unusual.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I do believe that Behe's own work and his publications are not about intelligent design
No, they're not.
when it comes
No.
to scientific literature. His books, yes, but the actual research papers, no.
It's the
He's-
same. Sorry.
The only ones that he has published that are to do with intelligent design are published in places like the journal Biocomplexity, which is the in-house journal of the Discovery Institute.
It's the
And
same
if-
with the Ken Ham Bill Nye debate. All of those they said they've published in secular journals. They've not been published. They've not published the 6,000-year-old Earth. They've been publishing actual science. So sorry, Fiona, carry on.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's something that we have to bear in mind. I mean, there was another Abel.
Well, you know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like they really believed.
Oh, Jesus, good in heaven. Sorry,
happened?
my cat just took a flying leap. You, get down.
Oh,
Good.
Oh my goodness!
I thought somebody just broke in the house there or something.
Do you want to know where it jumped to? See that shelf up there?
Yeah,
Whoa!
Yeah.
From the
That's a-
kitchen table.
that's
And
a
it
healthy
jumped-
leap.
Yeah. But it was
Oh,
hanging.
my goodness.
It's knocked over a kitchen chair in the process, and it was hanging on by its two front paws.
Maybe it's maybe it's a transitional species, Fiona. Maybe it's
Actually,
not really a cat.
Actually, I think it just didn't want to hear me talk, so I'm going to shut up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Arboreal cats.
But one of the things that I find fascinating was some of these highfalutin names that have been given to certain institutes, etc. And I was mentioning is it Douglas Abel?
Yes.
And he had, I can't even remember the name that he used for this research institute. And he gave its address, and somebody looked the address up, and it was a residential house with hanging baskets outside with little flowers. And it was.
Well, I mean, there's comedians that have been doing jokes about that forever. It's like a bank is First National this or that or blah blah blah. It's not Bank of Stan.
Yeah, and that's
It has a lot of
that's the
credibility.
problem, because in doing that, in trying to appear credible,
Right.
but using tactics like that, it hasn't done them any favors.
No.
And it almost strikes me that it so far up until now, it's been a case of trying to get round having to do the bench work.
Right.
I think though I think the thing to keep in mind, at least that I think is the case, is that we sometimes we mistakenly think that the intelligent design crew are doing things like this, like you said, that this doesn't help their case, but we think that they're doing it to fool us, and that's not the point at all. I think they're fully aware that most people that are involved in the sciences are completely aware that these organizations are their garage, and they could care less that you know that. What they're going after is they're going after the people that don't have that background and don't have the impetus to go check out that background, but simply see the surface picture, and that's all they care about. Those are the people they're going after. They're going after the guy in the school board. They're going after the parents of children. They're going after people who have no idea that this is the case.
Can I qualify that, please? Because I think this goes to the heart of like what Fiona is saying. What we are often seeing when you go look at a lot of intelligent design, quote-unquote, sites and people promoting intelligent design, we're still seeing the Great Wizard of Oz. They're promoting intelligent design, but behind the curtain is creationism.
Sure.
So there is a distinct difference between the people who are using intelligent design to push creationism, or as a front for creationism, and those people who really want to work on a concept of intelligent design. So intelligent design has a really bad name out there.
But they have the means to...
That's what people think.
They have the means to be transparent, though. That can change if they make it available.
But that's the problem. The they is the problem. Because most of the they that we see are, at least that I've seen when I look at the various different websites, are the people who are promoting intelligent design as a cloak for creationism.
Right, I get that.
So how do you tell who's who? That's part of the problem.
I think
there's enough marketing people out there. I don't think it's as complicated now as it used to be. It may still be complicated, but I don't think it's nearly as complicated as it used to be, and I think that it's probably not as expensive either. If you want to be transparent, you can be transparent. It may not be received as you want it to be, but you can expose what you're doing, how you're doing it, and make it available to people to scrutinize.
I think part of this is, not to throw another analogy in there, but I think this is a little bit like Mitt Romney in the last election. In the sense that, there was this big push and big sort of debate, if you will, about whether Mormonism was a Christian religion. And the Mormons love to say that, well, we're Christians too. We're just a different branch of Christianity, which sort of flies in the face of most definitions of what Christianity is. But that aside, I think they're perfectly aware of that. But they do it because they're going to get political mileage from the people who want to vote for them but are having a hard time. So as long as they can hear them call themselves Christians, then they kind of justify that, and they've got a whole new contingency now with the conservative, conservative Christian America. They want to be on that bandwagon. The same way the Jehovah's Witnesses want to say they're Christians. They don't care about being Christians per se, but they want to be included in our concept of Christians because it gets them somewhere. And I think it's the same with intelligent design. I think they throw the opposite because it carries them. In the mind of the general populace, this sounds good. It's a great marketing name. How can you be against intelligent design? I mean,
Nissan used to be Datsun. Companies changed their names. If you can create a different concept around this and give it a different label to distinguish it. I just think that there's got to be something more to it that's keeping it from advancing if there is actually a validity to even parts of this concept as presented.
Well, my argument for this...
I mean, the problem is, like, with this... I'm just going to say this for a moment, and you can continue your point, Carl. The problem is, like, with ID advocates is that through asserting this, they're undermining education in the first world and hence retarding its potential. If they claim that there's some predictive power behind this, and let's call besides creationism, honestly, they should have the results or the experiments to try and demonstrate this. But however, it really is, the predictive power of it is zero. So scientists or rational thinking people can't really work with that in terms of empiricism or test or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that this whole concept, when you hear the ID people talk and they say, well, we're not saying that this intelligent designer has to be a god, right? It could be somebody. It could be aliens from another planet, okay, right? And my whole argument there is, you know what? That makes your case worse, because if there was even the slightest, the faintest evidence that we had really truly been visited by aliens from another planet, the scientific community would be on this like shit on a pile of flies on a pile of horse shit. You couldn't keep them away from this if we actually thought we could demonstrate that there were aliens. I mean, really demonstrate it. It is patently absurd. That's the case. The very fact that nobody wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole, to me, is conclusive evidence.
Or a 10-foot fall. Or a 10-foot fall.
Well, yeah, I said that. But yeah, I mean, realistically, if there was real evidence of aliens out there, you really trying to convince me that nobody would want to look at it? Please, that just lies in the face of stupid. It really does.
Sorry, I'm just looking at something.
Okay. It's not me, is it? No. Okay,
No.
good, Fiona.
No.
Fiona, I'm going to get going, but I wanted to thank you for doing this. I really enjoyed it, and it was very informative and enlightening. And I'm going to go read Jerry Coyne's book right now. I actually just picked it up, and I'm going to go through that.
Take care, Sheik.
Talk
to you later.
Take care of yourself. Nice to have you.
Go walk that dog.
Later.
I'm going to be taking it off here soon because we started at about 10 o'clock. It's now 12:30.
Oh.
Yes, I know how time flies when you're having fun. But I would like to ask those of you who were a bit mystified by the stance I took before we went on air, that the intelligent design proponents should actually be pleased with the Dover judgment. Do you now understand why I say that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
At first it does sound a bit odd, but it actually did them a big favour.
I think my one question, though, is there a separate intelligent design group or anything? I mean, that's separate from the Creation Institute? And stuff like that?
Yes.
Because I did a search, but I didn't find anything right offhand.
They are slowly attempting to distance themselves.
Because there is an intelligent design website, but that's tied to the Creation Institute.
Yeah, but one of the problems is their case isn't helped by certain well-known YouTubers who will make a case for intelligent design and then tag on to it, repent for the end is nigh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got you.
Yeah.
This is one of the problems that they have, and this is one of the hangovers from the Dover trial, because the Dover trial linked intelligent design so closely to creationism because of the book. As Matthew Hunt was making that point, that trial was about that book. It ended up expanding out, and the judge actually considered intelligent design as it stood at the time and declared that it wasn't science. But the trial itself just dealt with that particular case. And when you have a shower of fundamentalists using intelligent design as a Trojan horse, then I would think that the intelligent design community would be very pleased that that action was struck down as unconstitutional. Otherwise, they would have been forever tied to young earth creationism. I mean, as I say, philosophically, I have got nothing against intelligent design. And I think you all know my position. You know I'm a theist. You know I'm a Christian. And my general take on things is that God put the basic laws of physics in place, lit the blue touch paper and stood well back, knowing what the result would be given the basic laws of physics that he had put into place.
Yeah.
And you also know that I will not tell you that I have any evidence for that belief.
Right.
And that's my belief, because I have to make sense of my faith within this reality. and I can't just dismiss observable evidence out of hand if it doesn't fit with my faith, because I don't think God expects us to do that. We have a brain. We should use it.
Well, I think that your version of faith, Fiona, is at least what I grew up thinking was sort of the common way that most Christians used faith, right? I mean, my mom went to a Lutheran, Dad went to a Lutheran church. They drugged me at Easter and Christmas, right? And for catechism classes, and if you had asked my dad, he would say, sure, I believe in God, and I go to church. But I don't think, like you, I don't think it never got to the point where he had to put blinders on in terms of what he had to learn or know to act and to understand the world that he lived in. Mm-hmm. This was an adjunct to that. It wasn't. It doesn't. If there was a contradiction for him, I'm sure if he looked at the Bible and said, well, here it says this, but this is what it seems to be in the real world, his basic thing probably would have been to say, well, then I must not understand what the Bible is really saying, because obviously this is what it is over here, and so I'll figure it out when I get there, and that was that, but never. It's bizarre to me.
I mean, as I say, I don't have anything against the concept of intelligent design. After all, I mean, in a way, my position is that there is an intelligent designer. It's also my position that there is a creator. Mm-hmm. But I'm not a creationist in the sense of the word that it has come to mean. In fact, there's a friend of mine who has the same faith as me, and we've actually got a Facebook group going, which is called, Reclaiming Creationism, because my friend holds the same beliefs as me, that God is the ultimate creator, but we will not say that we are creationists because of the connotations that have become associated with that word, which is young earth creationism. Right. And so we're sort of trying to reclaim creationism to what it means, that God is the ultimate creator. And the differences that everybody is having is in how he did it, the mechanism by which he did it. And I think when, as a scientist, though, I've got to be very careful and say that I cannot take that belief into a laboratory and allow it to affect the way I would do my work. Because as soon as you go outside the realm of a testable hypothesis, then you've gone outside the realm of science. And it's for that reason that I think that at the moment intelligent design can't be considered a science, because we don't really have anything that is truly testable. How do you test for intelligent design? And at the moment, we can't actually do it.
But I hate when you say that. I get goosebumps a little bit, only because I can hear the intelligent designer in response to that saying, right? Well, then how do we deal with multiverse theory? Is that not science? How do we deal with string theory? Is that not science? Because you could say the same thing about those. That there's nothing there that we can falsify or test.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, I mean, I'm not going to say that because I don't know enough about multiverse theory or about string theory, anything like that. I will only stick to the field that I at least know something about and talk about when I do science. And I don't do science that involves multiverse or string theory or anything like that.
See, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm even less qualified, but I think if I had to say why ID is not science, I think very simply because it is dogmatic. It is by definition true, and there is no amount of evidence that you could put forth, even if you could find it, that could make it incorrect. So even if you were to make a time machine, Fiona, and you were to go back and watch every single species break off from its prior common ancestor, and you spent billions of years, in your time machine to watch the whole thing, in the end, they would simply say, well, somehow you were deceived or mistaken, because this must be the truth, because this is theology. It is not. It is not about science, and I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Carlton, I think I'm just gonna throw my hat in there for a second. I think the problem is, yeah, and this kind of pisses me off, for lack of a better term, because I actually hear some creationists or ID advocates say that it's really like we both have the same evidence, we just look at it differently. I think that's bold for one reason. For one is we don't have the same evidence. For scientists, they're looking at the biosphere, the biological organization of life, and how and the reason behind its complexity. And the thing is, with regard to evolutionary theory, the main things is life, like all life, regardless of if it's living, it dies at some point. Organisms that are unfit to their environment are less likely to pass down genes, and life reproduces with variation. Now, if you accept these three axioms, it's reasonable to expect to see organisms, when you apply selective pressures to a population, they will produce complex structures over time through genetic mutation and adaptation. This is the case. You can see this with homologous structures with genetic similarities and so on and so forth. But the thing is, with intelligent design, is that it mainly gets its presuppositions from the Bible. They just try to divorce that and try to use instead of like God or a creator with an intelligent designer. Well, yeah, and even with that, it's still zero with it.
Well, yeah, I think Fiona, I'm going to put words in Fiona's mouth here, but I think even with Fiona's background, if tomorrow alien spaceships arrived on Earth and said, well, panspermia is the way this works, and we put all these all animals there, and if they could demonstrate that, Fiona would give up her work in a heartbeat and believe that if the evidence supported it.
Yes.
And the creationists wouldn't. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, screw them. Tell them to get evidence, and then we'll accept their claims.
Yeah.
No, the burden of proof is on them. Seriously.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems. I think where intelligent design goes from here, I think it has to be in a lab. That has to be removed from religion because of the some of the dogmatic adherence to, well, the Bible says this and that must be true, because that is not science. Take it into religion's class if you want to tie it in with God.
Would you say...
and put it in sociology if you want to not really look at the nature of the designer, but you're just looking at design.
Well, how would you answer Fiona, the person who says, let's take a history class, okay? So because it's less emotional. But what a person that says, well, we teach world history, or we're going to teach about World War II. But there are people, for example, right, that we might consider them crazy, but there are people who say that there is no evidence, for example, in history, that there were ever any concentration camps for the Jews, that this whole thing, never happened. This is all, an invention. This is a Jewish history that they've imposed on us. Okay, now. If a teacher, if a school said, look, we want to teach the regular history, right, that everybody's come to know, but there is this group, maybe it's a large group, that says that this is the case, so we want to teach that alongside of it in the interest of showing both viewpoints. Mm-hmm. Now, if it was a history class, would you have a problem with that?
Oh yes, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Why would you have a problem with that?
That's what I was saying, Carlton, that we wouldn't put ID into the science class because it's not a science. Just like Holocaust denial isn't history.
Well, but I think you have to be careful there. So, when you're saying it's not history, you're saying it's not true, is what it sounds like to me.
No,
and I don't know that's the same thing. No.
You're missing the point completely.
Okay.
What I would say is that you could look at it in a sociology class when you say how society works and you've got conspiracy theorists and you've got Holocaust deniers and there are groups that will believe various strange things.
Okay.
And while it might or might not be true, the fact is these groups are there that believe it, and it's teaching about how society interacts. Okay. I wouldn't teach it as history.
Okay, fair enough.
Can I give a
Similarly,
comparison?
I wouldn't teach intelligent design as science,
Okay.
because at the moment it isn't science.
Right. Can I give a comparison?
Mm-hmm.
Let's take God out of creationism for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at creationism, and just for the record, I have been reading creationist literature for the last 40 years. I have quite a collection. So I'm pretty familiar with the changes, and they've changed quite a bit. I remember when none of them believed in plate tectonics. But what most of creationism is trying to poke holes in science. They find this little place where the weave isn't quite so good, and they try to stretch it out and say, see, here's a giant hole in science. And that's the way they approach science. Holocaust deniers do the same sort of thing with history. They try to find these little holes in history, and they try to stretch them out, like saying, oh, well, they couldn't possibly, I got into an argument with a guy once, they couldn't possibly have burned all these bones to ash in this short period of time. And I brought up the pictures and pointed out they didn't burn them to ash.
Mm-hmm.
They were burned to broken pieces of bones. But that's the way Holocaust deniers approach history. They don't start with, here's a body of evidence that proves that the Holocaust didn't happen. No, they're starting from, let's poke holes into history to try to prove our point of view. Just like that's what creationists do with science. Let's try to poke holes in science. They have no real scientific, that's why creation science is an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Because there is no basis to the science itself. There's nothing to build from except all these odd little holes in science that keep getting filled, which I've noticed over the last 40 years. Science fills this hole, creationists go over and find another one and try to stretch that one and make a bigger hole. So that's why I would say that Holocaust denialism isn't history, because there's no basis for it. There's no foundation for it.
I agree with you, and I'm sorry. I wanted to make it clear, since we are still live. I was just playing devil's advocate there a little bit.
I know you were. Good point, though.
But I think that, you know, and as was yours, Becky, I think that when you look at science or history, and I think the same thing could be said for both. When we look at a theory in science, all we're saying is that this is the best explanation that we currently have for the facts that are in front of us. We are not saying that it fits perfectly everywhere, you know, like a sheet of satin. There are going to be wrinkles. And you know what? Those wrinkles become endeavors for future research, because we want to understand why it's a wrinkle. And if we need to adjust the theory accordingly, we do. Or maybe we find out it's not really a wrinkle, we just didn't understand something, and then that's fine. And I think the same is true in history. You know, if we have something in history that doesn't quite seem to fit the storyline, we don't throw away the storyline if it's the best one we've got. We look at that piece that's problematic, and we try to understand it in the context of what our model is for European history. And I think you're totally right, and I think that's exactly the opposite of the way that they approach it. They approach it like, ooh, where can I find a darker spot here that I can, you know, make everybody focus on that, and let's forget the 99.99999% of the facts that it fits perfectly, and let's focus on this one, you know, that maybe legitimately does seem to have, you know, there's a legitimate question there. You know, Fiona and I talked about this last week or two. You know, the one about the monkeys. How did the New World monkeys get to the New World without a land bridge, right? Okay, so, you know, for me, at my level of not, you know, which isn't very much at all, for me this seems to be maybe problematic. I can see where there's a legitimate question there. But you don't throw out the entire theory of evolution simply because I don't have a pat answer for that, you know, and I may need to do more study.
Yeah, they made a movie about that. King Kong, North to Alaska. That was a land bridge in between Siberia and Alaska.
You know, I tell you what, he can't find a bear, so now he's looking for hairy gorillas. I don't know, Eddie. With you.
Oh, yeah.
Right, guys, I'm going to end the broadcast now, right? Because we've gone on another half hour.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We're so good at this. But I'm going to end the broadcast now. And I think we've only really scraped the surface of the Rover trial, because it's such a big subject. The transcript's go on forever. I'd be interested if Carlton would get back to me once he has spent the next 6 months ploughing through these transcripts, seeing as he wants to read them.
I will wait a minute. Now wait a minute. I will make you a wager. I will make you a bet, an agreement, Garrett.
Right.
I will read through every single one of those transcripts if you will solve that logic puzzle that I put up the other day.
Oh, rats! What one was that?
Tit for tat.
Ooh, wait! You put up a logic puzzle?
Well, after you go off air, I'll repeat it. I don't want to take your
Carlton
time.
is notorious.
I love logic puzzles.
Oh,
I love logic puzzles.
All
I
right,
do
well,
them for fun.
It isn't what's next in the sequence.
No, no.
OTTFFS.
Go ahead and end the hangout. No, it's not. End the hangout,
That's
and then
okay.
Okay, go. Then I'll tell you.
So anyway, as I say, I think we've only just scratched the surface of this, and that there's so much more that could be discussed about it. And if anybody wants to discuss the trial again, let me know, because I'd be interested in doing that, especially in more depth, maybe taking a couple of witness testimonies to go through, because I'm trying to get into understand the minds of the people who were involved in this mess and why they did it. Because from a Christian perspective, they did me no favours. They did the ID no favours. They did science no favours. They did Christianity no favours. So I don't understand what the point was. So if anybody wants to do another hangout on this, let me know. Or if you're doing one of your own, please invite me. But I hope those who have been watching, and we've been up at 25 at one point, I think, which is quite stunning.
Cool.
Yeah. So those who watched, just to explain it, the title of the hangout, The Pros from Dover. That's a saying from MASH. Hawkeye told a story that he used to go into golf clubs, and if he said to them that he was the pro from Dover, he would be allowed to play a free round. 8 out of 10 times he would be allowed to play a free round of golf. And there are actually a number of places called Dover in America, so he could choose which one he thought was the safest bet that nobody would check on. And then in one of in the series, I think they went to go and deal with a patient in a city somewhere, and as they walked into the room, Hawkeye said, "It's the pros from Dover." And so that's why I called it that, the pros from Dover. So, yes, because otherwise there'll be bluebirds over the White Cliffs of Dover. But then I realised that was very Anglo-centric, and nobody would get it.
Right.
So anyway, thank you very much for joining me tonight. It's been I really enjoyed the discussion, and I hope everybody else has as well.
It's been great, yeah.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Fiona.
Yeah, and I'm going to go off here, and we can probably just gabble on off here. But thank you very much, everybody. And if anybody has any questions, and to be honest, there was no questions in the Q&A, so that's good. We must have explained it really well. So thank you very much, everybody. And we'll see you all the next time. Right, wave, everybody.
Wait, well, my icon is waving, even though you can't see it. There we go. Okay.